Hello, family. Hello, friends. I pray that you have all had an awesome week. I am going to dive right into this week's message. I'm going to recap a little bit about what I shared about last week. So last week, I gave a few examples of how to set boundaries or how we set them, right? We can use our body, meaning our property, if we see it that way, to set boundaries. We can also use our words. Words are very important in setting healthy boundaries. We can even use time or emotional distancing as tools to set healthy boundaries. Today, I am going to be using a simple illustration of a very, very well-known passage from the Bible. And through it, I'm hoping that we get a glimpse into what setting healthy boundaries looks like. I'll be taking this example from Dr. Henry Cloud and Dr. John Townsend's book, Boundaries. So I'll be using the example from that book. But the passage that I want to go to is found in the book of Luke, chapter 10. And it's the story of the Good Samaritan. It's a very well-known story. I'm going to actually read it. It's a short story, so I'm going to read it. You can just listen in. A Jewish man was traveling from Jerusalem down to Jericho, and he was attacked by bandits. They stripped him of his clothes, beat him up, and left him half dead beside the road. By chance, a priest came along, but when he saw the man laying there, he crossed to the other side of the road and passed him by. A temple assistant walked over and looked at him laying there, but he also passed by on the other side. Then a despised Samaritan came along, and when he saw the man, he felt compassion for him. Going over to him, the Samaritan soothed his wounds with olive oil and wine and bandaged them. Then he put the man on his own donkey and took him to an inn where he took care of him. The next day, he handed the innkeeper 2 silver coins, telling him, "Take care of this man. If his bill runs higher than this, I'll pay you the next time I'm here." Now, which of these 3 would you say was a neighbor to the man who was attacked by the bandits? Jesus asked. The man replied, "The one who showed him mercy." Okay, so this is a great passage on, again, setting healthy boundaries. And also when to maybe not set them or just letting them go a little bit. So I'm going to get into that in a little bit. But before I do so, I am going to show us an alternate version of that passage and what it might have looked like if the Good Samaritan was a boundaryless man. So if the Good Samaritan had no boundaries, no sense of boundaries, this is what we may have been reading instead. So, the Jewish man was attacked, and the Samaritan man comes to his rescue. He takes him to the hotel. And when the Jewish man hears the Samaritan telling the innkeeper, that he's going to give him some coins and that he'll pay him next time he's around if it happens to run more than that. So then the man could have turned around and said, "What? Wait? You're leaving me?" So the Samaritan man would have said, "Yeah, I have business to take care of in Jericho." "Oh, that's so selfish of you to do. I'm in terrible shape. Can't you see? I need you to stay with me. And if you leave, I won't have anyone to talk to. And besides that, you're setting a terrible example of being a Christian if you leave. Whatever happened to deny yourself?" So then the Samaritan man would have said something like, "Yeah, I guess you're probably right. Maybe I'm not setting a great example. Maybe it is uncaring of me to leave you here alone. I should probably do more. I'll postpone my trip then for the few more days." So then 3 days pass, and the Samaritan man gets a knock on the door from a messenger that hands him a letter. And the letter says, could no longer wait for you, so I decided to sell the camels to another party. Our next herd will be available in 6 months. So when the Samaritan man hears this, he gets enraged and he starts yelling, and he says, he yells at the Jewish man, "See what you've done? You've caused me to lose those camels, and now this may put me out of business. How could you do this to me?" We'll end it there. So I want us to analyze this scenario. Most of us, unfortunately, are probably pretty familiar with that kind of scenario, because maybe we've been moved to compassion to help someone, and then only to have them turn around and manipulate us into giving them more than what we wanted to give. And so then we end up resentful and angry. Or perhaps we've been the manipulator on the other end, and we've pressured someone into giving us something until they give in. And because they're giving out of pressure, and not out of a heart's desire, they end up resenting us, and then, problems are created in that relationship. So either way, both people lose. So I am going to be using this passage and the alternate version also. I'm going to refer to it every now and then because I want us to understand the importance of having clarity in what I am responsible for, what you're responsible for, and what we are not responsible for. It's good to have clarity. Chaos is from the enemy, and when there are clear vision, when we have a clear vision and a clear understanding of what we are responsible for, it helps us. It helps us in empowering us. And when we have clarity, we also become again empowered, and we can set the healthy boundaries that we need to set so that we don't have misunderstandings, so we're not taking advantage of, and so that we don't end up in resentment and angry, right? Because that'll make us sick. So I'm going to talk about what I am responsible for. And again, the goal is for there to be clarity so that we can be empowered. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is I am responsible for the attitudes and beliefs that I have towards something. And what I mean by that is that in life, in God, how we look at God, how we view Him, how we view work, how we view our relationships, all of those things have a belief system and an attitude that we've attached to each because of what we've been taught. Most of our attitudes towards something, most of our belief systems have been handed down to us. So they were given to us in our formative years. And the thing is that we call these traditions usually. And Jesus actually spoke against traditions a lot. If we go back to the Gospels, that's one of the themes that he spoke against a lot. He wanted people to own their own beliefs and not just take a tradition that was handed down to them. And also, as believers, we are to hold to the truths that God imparts to us, not to the traditions that we've been handed down. So in the imagined version of the Good Samaritan, actually, no, the thing is that the Good Samaritan had these values already set in place. And when he came across, this isn't the alternate version, this is what actually occurs in the original story, he's moved with compassion. And maybe, the cultural traditions would have told him to not approach this Jewish man. But he owned his beliefs at that moment. He owned what he was deciding to do. And so I think that part of understanding boundaries and part of knowing, where we start and where we end is understanding that maybe there are traditions that we've been handed down, belief systems that we've been handed down, attitudes that we've been handed down that we need to be responsible for. That we need to sit maybe and say, maybe that's really not something that I need to continue being a part of, or need to continue engaging in, or need to keep perpetuating in my family lineage. And so when we do that, we are owning that. We are owning our own belief system. And again, it's important as believers to hold this up to God's truth in our lives. Because many traditions and many of the things that we're given and taught really aren't. They don't go hand in hand with God's truths. And even if we're believers, even if we've been brought up in a Christian home, it doesn't necessarily mean that the traditions we've been handed down line up with God's truth. So we are always needing to be responsible for our belief system, for the attitudes that we have. And we can't just accept tradition and say, that's what I was handed down. I believe this because this is what I believe. No, we have to take ownership and responsibility over our belief system and our attitudes. So that's one thing we are responsible for, no one else. I'm responsible for my feelings. Feelings should never, ever be ignored, right? We shouldn't, or we shouldn't also, vice versa, place too much emphasis on them. We can't put our feelings in charge of us. So we have a good indicator of how things are going in our lives based on our feelings. Sometimes we feel angry or frustrated, so we need to pay attention to that. Why are we angry? Why are we frustrated? If I live perpetually angry, maybe there's something that I need to look into in my life. And I am responsible for that. No one else is. I am responsible for my feelings. In that alternate story of the Good Samaritan, the Good Samaritan was so upset, he started yelling, you did this, you, and he was upset. His feelings came undone, because he probably felt like a victim at that point. But he is responsible for his feelings, right? As I am responsible for mine. And again, we shouldn't ignore our feelings. They're great indicators of maybe something off, maybe something's not right. So we should pay attention to our feelings. But again, that's no one else's responsibility but mine to take care of. And if something did upset me, maybe it's something that happened earlier in the day, and I'm at home. I have to own my own feelings. I have to own and be responsible for them, and shouldn't let them just bleed out and act out on them. I need to be held accountable and responsible for my feelings. Our behaviors also are things that we are responsible for. Unfortunately, many of us were not taught properly the principles of sowing and reaping, which is something that Jesus spoke about a lot. We have consequences for our behaviors, and that's a good thing. We're supposed to learn from the consequences as we're growing up. But the problem is that if we're always being rescued from our consequences when we were little, when the stakes weren't so high, if we were not taught to own our consequences, then we're going to get, this skewed vision or a skewed way of thinking that I'm always going to have to be rescued. And if I'm not, I am being a victim here. We have to learn consequences in order to learn to establish healthy boundaries. Otherwise, we are going to place blame on other people. The Samaritan, in the alternate version, did not accept responsibility for the consequences of his behavior or of his choices, which is the next point. We are also responsible for the choices that we make. So with the choices, we have to also think about the consequences, right? So one common boundary violation happens when we tell others that they are the ones to blame, like the Samaritan did in that alternate version. He suddenly turned around to the Jewish man and said, you ruined me. You're responsible now for my business failure. And that was a choice that he made. Now, maybe it was under pressure, but he still made that choice. And so when we try to lay the responsibility of choices on someone else, it is just something that will make us into victims when we're not. We'll think that we are victims when we really are not. And we won't be able to take and own the responsibility for those choices. The book of Galatians speaks of self-control. When we understand to own the choices we make, phrases such as, they made me do it, or I had to, those are going to leave our vocabulary, because there is no such thing. No one can make us do anything. We are responsible for our choices, for our feelings. We are responsible for our belief systems. And that's just part of it. I'm going to stop here because I don't want to make this too long, so that we can keep it engaging. I know that after about 15 minutes, then it's usually like, okay, it's too long now. So I'm going to keep it now. I'm going to stop here, and I have a few more examples of things that we are responsible for. I'm going to go ahead and close this series out next week with the rest of these responsibilities that we have to understand and take. And maybe I'll dispel a few myths that have to do with healthy boundary setting. So that'll be next week, and that'll be the conclusion of this series. I pray that, as you've been listening into this series, that you feel equipped and empowered. And again, this is just an introduction to boundaries. This is meant to lead you to do your own, soul searching with the Lord in regards to this. Ask Holy Spirit about these things. Read up more. I am here. I can give you resources if you want. You can ask me and I will provide them for you. But again, more than anything, my prayer is that as you're listening in, that you begin to feel empowered, and that you begin to understand that boundaries, setting healthy boundaries, is such a liberating thing. It's a wonderful thing. And maybe when we start to practice it, we may do it wrong. We may put up walls that are really high at first, and then we're going to ask Holy Spirit, and we're going to learn to take these little, those walls down. And it's okay, to sometimes make choices that would seem like we are letting boundaries go, but if it's something that we're understanding that we are doing, and we're okay with it, and we understand the consequence of our choices, then it's empowering and it's freeing when we do it not out of compulsion or not out of somebody else manipulating us, but because maybe we're simply being led by the Holy Spirit, like the Good Samaritan was, to do something that maybe he wouldn't have done, on a regular basis, but he felt Holy Spirit leading him to do so. All right. So next in-person meeting is going to be on Sunday, August 4th. That means that our summer is coming to an end. Oh boy. But Sunday, August 4th, 10 a.m. I pray that you all have a blessed week, and I hope to see you soon.